We recently moved to this property. Our dog has never dug ever. He picked up a strong scent and continually keeps leading us here to dig deeper.
G-H, I love you still, and you know I always will. Till the end of time, I won't change my mind.
Not dead. Miraculously, she survived just the unimaginable. Her name is Charla Nash. Charla almost always covers her face with a hat and scarf. She wears it, she says, because she doesn't want to scare people.
I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick. I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry. I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done.
He's paying a speeding ticket with 22,000 pennies.
I felt good to kind of stick it to the man.
Angry because he got a ticket for going 39 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone.
We pay with pennies to clog the system, but I wanted to make a point.
Brett got the 22,000 pennies from 2 local banks. He broke up the rolls of pennies with a hammer, then lugged the heavy buckets inside, where he dumped them right on the counter in front of the shocked clerk. Some folks think what Brett did was way out of line. All you did was punish the poor clerk who would have to count all that. Brett got this phone message from the clerk's office.
You actually have change coming back to you. It's calling to see when you wanted to pick up your change.
Whatever you do not feel bad for this woman. This woman's name is Lovely Kristen Antoinette Johnson, and she had a 6-month-old baby. But one more thing is, she was a severe drug addict, and she would often invite friends over to her house or go to her friends' houses to do drugs. When she would do this, she would just lock her son up in a car seat and leave him inside the house. And she would place him in the attic where she wouldn't be able to hear him. Well, on this particular occasion, the little baby went 4 days without any food and starved to death. Apparently, the baby had diaper rash so severe his skin was literally falling off. When she found the baby, his body was already decomposing, and she still took him to the ER and got arrested there. And she was sentenced to 20 to 80 years in prison for the murder of her baby.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 35. This creature is known as a woolly monkey, and due to poachers and people trading and selling them illegally, there's only 1,000 of these little guys left in the world. The uncanny valley is a phenomenon in which people become fearful at things that are very close to human, but something isn't quite right. Throughout history, mummies actually weren't that rare, that is, until the Victorian British ate so many of them. During the Arctic exploration, one of the scientists was complaining that his shoes were soaking wet. Later, when he took them off, he found this was because his feet were decaying and liquidized with his blood. A man once donated his recently deceased mother's body for scientific research. Later, he discovered that the research facility sold it to the US Army for $5,000, strapped it to a chair, and blew it up with explosives. Fascinating as fuck. Jeremy Meeks, the man whose mugshot was so sexy that it landed him a modeling contract while he was still in jail. He served 13 months, and shortly after his release, he walked in New York Fashion Week. Eric Money is the only player to score points for both teams in a single NBA game. When the Nets played the Sixers in 1978, he scored for the Nets before being traded to the Sixers in the middle of the game. In World War II, British soldiers used well bikes, a small motorcycle that could fit in an air canister and be dropped out of planes with a parachute. On New Year's Eve in 2020, a friendly soccer match was played between rival drug cartels. However, it quickly became not so friendly when the match ended with 16 deaths and 5 severe injuries. During the making of Prince of Egypt, animators who failed or messed up were sent to work on Shrek. This was seen as a form of punishment known as getting Shreked.
If you are going to kill me, turn the right one off. Okay.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 23. In 2008, 3 Texas teenagers were arrested after they dug up a skeleton and used the skull as a bong. The police later found that the skull belonged to an 11-year-old boy. While uncommon, there have been many cases of people's intestines being sucked out by vacuum toilets on airplanes. So if you want to keep your rectum, be sure to stand up before you flush. Every single fig has had at least one wasp die inside of it. Nosebleeds can bleed out of your eye sockets. And it's possible to be allergic to your own blood. There's a rare phenomenon called a stone baby where a fetus dies and doesn't get absorbed by the body. And people have been known to carry these fetuses for up to 40 years, completely unaware. There's a shack in Louisiana called the Devil's Toy Box where people supposedly lose their minds after spending any amount of time there.
This old lady killed so many people. Baba Anushka, she loved chemistry. And when her husband died, she was like, I'm gonna make the house into a laboratory and sell potions. So a bunch of girls came to her and they were like, we don't want our husbands to go to war. And she was like, I can make them really, really sick so they don't have to. And they were like, yeah, do that. So she started getting really, really popular. But then all the girls were like, we actually don't like our husbands. Can you do a little more? And Baba Anushka was like, yeah, I can kill them. So then all the girls were like, oh, we like this. So Baba Anushka made these deadly potions, gave them to the girls gave them to their abusive husbands, and they were dead in like 8 days. And Baba Anushka would do this thing where she'd ask the girls, how heavy is the problem? Which was code for, how heavy is your husband? Because I gotta make sure I put enough in it, mama. She was so successful that she hired a sales agent to go into town and like sniff out people with marital problems. But this one girl fucked it all up. After she killed her shitty husband, she used another potion to kill her new husband's rich uncle. And the police were like, can you explain this? And she was like, it was Baba Anushka. Baba Anushka was like, are you fucking kidding me? But she ended up getting out of jail and then living to 100.
What if I combine Sour Patch Kids and crime documentary? "911, what's your emergency?" Sometimes things don't happen the way you think they will.
911, what's your emergency? They are so sour.
I showed up to the scene. Said I'd never seen anything like this.
Ma'am, what is happening? Oh my god, now they're sweet.
First they were sour. Then they were sweet.
Welcome back to Female Murderer TikTok. This one's about Nanny Doss. Buckle up. Nanny and her husband had 4 kids. 2 of them died back to back from poisonings. The husband was like, something ain't right. And then he took the kids and left. So Nanny gets remarried, kills him, buys a house and land with the insurance money, and is like, oh, I like this. She reunites with her daughter. Her daughter's like, hey, can you watch my baby for a little bit? And she's like, totally. And then the baby dies in like 3 days. And then it starts to get lethal. She marries her 3rd husband. He dies that year. Her mom breaks her hip and she's like, I'll take care of you. She's dead. Both of her sisters die in the same year in different towns, all while Nanny's visiting. She marries her 4th husband. He doesn't even make it a few months. Then she marries her 5th husband. He dies a month later. But finally, in that autopsy, they were like, there's a lot of rat poison in this guy. Did you do this? And then Nanny goes, yeah, I did that to all of them. So she gets life in prison, and before she dies, they interview her, and they're like, why did you do it? Was it for the money? And she goes, money? I was bored.
What happens when a serial killer kidnaps the most dangerous woman in the world? Fredia Gibbs is the first Black female kickboxing world champion. But as a kid, she was always bullied and didn't know how to fight back. One day, they even chased her home. So her mom gave her a broom and told her this:
you don't beat that ass, I'ma beat your ass, so you're gonna get 2 ass whippings.
Her uncle then taught her martial arts, and she became a professional kickboxer. But one day, she came face to face with the Grim Sleeper, a murderer who killed over 100 women. But things were different now. Fredia wasn't a scared little girl anymore. She knew how to fight.
He's like, now let me just stick it in, then I take you home. And I said no, and I was going around, no, absolutely not. Then he went to swing, boom, and I blocked it. Said, oh, so you one of them fighting ones. And I grabbed it in his shirt tail, swung him back, I stepped on his chest and I grabbed his and I said, listen, when a bitch says no, she means no. And I walked it, bam! Then I left.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 36. Babies bounce. Their bones are so soft that instead of thudding, they actually bounce a little. An Arizona man named Paul Menchaca was arrested after he faked having Down syndrome and hired female caregivers to bathe him and change his dirty diapers. Kids under 5 years old will often try to hide from a fire instead of running, and firefighters find the bodies. Jacqueline Durand was hired to dog sit for a pit bull and German shepherd and was told that they would be in their kennels. However, when she arrived, the dogs immediately attacked her, leaving her with over 800 bite marks and severe blood loss. If you want to sell your organs on the dark web, you'll get the most money for your small intestine, worth about $800,000. This sketch shows the autopsy report of Kobe Bryant after he died in a helicopter crash in 2020. If you look closely, you can see they noted a crown tattoo on Kobe's shoulder. Makes the whole thing a lot more real. This video shows Caleb Brown chained up in the slave storage container of Todd Kohlhepp, the Amazon review killer. Between 2003 and 2016, he murdered at least 7 people in South Carolina, dropping several clues along the way. He left several reviews on Amazon products that he used in the killings, like this one that reads, "Keep in your car when you have to hide the bodies and left the full-size shovel at home." In 2016, Kayla and her boyfriend Charles went missing after they went to clean Todd's residence. No one heard from them for months until a post was made to Charles' Facebook page saying that he and Kayla were expecting a baby. Shortly after, an old photo of the couple was posted with the caption, "We are fine." This raised suspicions, leading police to trace these posts to a storage unit on Todd's property. There, they freed Kayla and took Todd into custody, where he bragged about burying several bodies on the property as well, including Kayla's boyfriend. He was given 7 life sentences, 1 for each of his murders, despite him confessing to many, many more.
There is no way in 1,000 years you'd be able to guess what's happening in this photo. Yes, it does look like the apartment of a former frat boy who can't decorate, but it's actually a still from the most evil reality television show to ever exist, where this man was kept in this apartment naked with no food for 15 months, while 17 million people in Japan tuned in. It's also the subject of tonight's episode, so let's dive in. So this is called Sweepstakes Life, and it was a show in Japan in the 90s. To cast the show, a group of men were told to come to a casting office with no other information. A box with a question mark was then wheeled into the room, and each of the men had to pull an envelope. This guy, Nasubi, is the guy that gets the winning slip, and this is where his nightmare begins. He was immediately blindfolded and thrown in the back of a car, where he was brought to this apartment and told to strip. This is also where he's told that anything he needs to survive needs to be won in sweepstakes that are in those magazines, meaning he couldn't eat anything until he won it, which didn't happen for 2 weeks. He wouldn't be let out of the apartment until he won 1 million yen worth of prizes, and he had no idea it would take him over a year to do so. I'm gonna have to do another part to this story, but check out tonight's episode for more.
Explaining the backstory of your viral videos.
While this may appear to be a seemingly innocent video of a boy dragging a trash can with a dog barking at it, what may surprise you is that inside of that trash can is the body of the boy's high school math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. And on October 22nd, 2013, she asked one of her students, Philip Chisholm, to talk to her after class. Philip had recently moved from Tennessee, and when Colleen brought this up in conversation, Philip got extremely upset, so she changed the conversation immediately. At around 3 o'clock, Miss Ritzer got up to go use the restroom, and a few minutes later, Philip followed behind her. It was there that he pulled out a box cutter and slit her throat 16 times before raping her. Philip calmly walked out of the bathroom and returned about 10 minutes later wearing a new set of clothes and carrying a trash bin alongside him. Security cameras outside of the school show Philip rolling the bin with her body into the woods. At this point, Colleen is barely alive. Philip dumps her body onto the ground and shoves a tree branch inside of her. He leaves the scene with his teacher's credit card and uses it to buy Taco Bell and go and see a Woody Allen movie. Philip Chisholm was caught later that night and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Cannibal facts that'll eat at you for days. If you thought Jeffrey Dahmer was picky for not eating people with tattoos, Venezuelan serial killer Dorangel Vargas, who ate 10 people, didn't like his victims to be overweight because he thought that they contained too much cholesterol. On Thanksgiving Day 1991, 23-year-old Omaima Nelson stabbed her sugar daddy William before carving him up and cooking his head in a deep fryer and eating him for dinner. In the 1970s, Jorge Negromonte, Jose, also known as the Brazilian Sweeney Todd, would bake his victims into pies before selling them to local townsfolk. After murdering and eating his classmate in 1981, Issei Sagawa was released from prison because of a loophole in Japanese law. Since then, he's actually profited off the crime, writing books, appearing on talk shows, and starring in adult films where he bites his fellow co-stars. In 2001, a man named Armin Maiwis posted an ad on a website called Cannibal Cafe looking for someone to be killed and eaten. A German engineer named Bernd Brandis volunteered, and after photos and videos of the incident were posted online, Armin was sent to jail, where today, he's a vegetarian. In 1904, a Swedish sailor named Carl Pettersson shipwrecked on an island inhabited by cannibals. He was captured and taken to a local king, whose daughter actually fell in love with him. The two then got married, had 9 kids, and Carl became the new king.
What blows my mind is everyone's calling it a submarine, and it's not legally a submarine. Like, it doesn't fit the requirements to be a submarine. It was supposed to function like an elevator. Here's what could have happened to cause this chaos. So the vessel runs off of batteries, and the number one thing that could have gone wrong is there was a total power blackout. It's unclear what the power backups are, or if there were any. I feel like there weren't. If you've watched the videos in this series, it does not seem like there would be. Now, I heard this on TikTok, so it might not be true, but apparently if the submarine failed, it was designed to float to the top. It was like a safety feature that was designed. So it actually could be floating above the water right now. The problem is they would still be stuck inside because the way it was designed, you can only get out when it is opened from the outside. So even if they weren't underwater, they would be relying on being rescued in order to get oxygen again. If the vessel is floating above the water, it needs to be found by ships or aircrafts or sonar buoys that are involved in the search. Sonar buoys are underwater detectors that are used to find submarines. They can't reach how deep in the ocean the Titanic is, though. The vessel is so small and it's white, so it's really hard to see. So if it is bobbing up and down in the ocean, it will blend in. Or it could be mistaken for like a shark or a dolphin or some sort of larger fish. It's really like finding a needle in a haystack. I do believe that it will be found eventually, but I don't think it's gonna be found by tomorrow. And if it is, it's gonna make a really good movie, I won't lie. Now, the US Navy has a special vehicle that can go really deep underwater. But before they use it, they have to find the submarine and attach it to a lifting device. I just really don't think that any of these vehicles are gonna find them in time to actually rescue them. I'm running out of time. Part 2 is already up. Follow my TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube for more. It really helps when you interact.
Ya estamos entrando en la época del susto y esta es quizá la mejor serie para empezarla. Hablemos de Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer es, a la fecha, uno de los asesinos en serie más famosos de toda la historia. Conocido también como el caníbal de Milwaukee, en un periodo de 12 años Dahmer desvivió al menos 17 jóvenes. A muchos de ellos los seducía diciéndoles que era fotógrafo y que les pagaría por modelar, y a la hora de la hora les hacía cosas que no puedo mostrar ni siquiera describir porque me bajan el video. La serie arranca con la captura de Dahmer en 1991 y de ahí conocemos su infancia, su adolescencia, sus primeros ataques y todos los pequeños eventos que poco a poco formaron al monstruo que hoy es uno de los personajes más macabros de la historia. La serie está de vete a la verga. Evan Peters como Jeffrey Dahmer hace un retrato perturbador pero muy preciso del asesino. No nomás le juega al loco, hace algo que se siente bastante cercano a la realidad. Y aunque nos cuenta la historia de Dahmer desde su infancia hasta cuando ya encarcelado tenía fans porque gente pendeja y en todos lados, la serie no está hecha para empatizar con él. No se trata de verlo como una víctima de las circunstancias, sino de entender cómo una persona puede transformarse en un monstruo. Vemos un trauma de su infancia, inmediatamente después lo vemos desviviendo un culero y se nos quita la empatía. Empecé a ver la serie luego que salió porque el morbo es cabrón, pero pensé, más allá del morbo, ¿para qué contar esta historia que ya se ha contado 1000 veces? Ya sabemos que el tipo es un monstruo y la serie lo retrata como tal, pero ¿para qué? Pues resulta que el enfoque de la serie tiene también mucho que decir. No solo nos hablan de la vida del asesino, hablan también de la ineptitud de la policía y de los privilegios que le permitieron a Dahmer seguir activo por tantos años. Muchas de sus víctimas eran hombres negros, gays, que se ligó en bares culeros. A la policía no le interesaba investigar qué pedo con esas víctimas. Hay una historia donde un morro logró escapar de las garras de Dahmer y cuando estaba con la policía, Dahmer los convenció que era su novio, que se le pasaron las copas, que solo estaban jugando. La policía le trajo a Dahmer de regreso a una de sus víctimas y ahí se lo dejaron. ¡No mames! Y quizá lo que más me gustó de la serie, conocemos más de la historia de Glenda Cleveland. Glenda fue vecina de Dahmer por años, escuchaba gritos, el motor de un cuchillo eléctrico a altas horas de la noche, el departamento de Jeffrey apestaba por pedazos de personas que se le estaban echando a perder y ella en más de una ocasión trató de llamar la atención de la policía, pero nunca le pinches hicieron caso.
Was anything done about the situation? You need the names or information or anything from us?
No, not at all.
Well, how old was this child?
It wasn't a child, it was an adult.
Muchas de las víctimas de Dahmer podrían seguir vivas hoy si una persona le hubiera hecho caso a esa señora. Tremenda la historia de este asesino y la serie le hace justicia. Nos lo muestran como el monstruo que fue, y si les gustan las historias macabras de gente real, esta es imperdible. Vale la pena.
The story of Steven Stainer, the boy who disappeared at 8 years old and returned 7 years later. One day, while walking home from school, Steven Stainer was taken into a car. The man brought Steven home and told him that his parents had let him stay the night. That was just the beginning of the 7-year brainwashing that this child would undergo. Steven was given a new name, Dennis, and was even enrolled in schools throughout the next years of his life. According to his teenage friends, he had a pretty normal social life. Everyone thought he was just a normal teenager until one day, he broke down in tears. He said he wanted to go home and he missed his family. This is the man who took Steven. His name was Kenneth Eugene Parnell. Throughout the years of Steven's kidnapping, he was sexually molested by this man. Sadly, none of his friends knew it. When Parnell would sense that Steven was getting too close to his friends, he would pick up and relocate. Later, Steven would say in his testimony that Parnell actually tried to get Steven to assist in other kidnappings. Being the good kid that he was, he never assisted. Till one day, Steven returned home from school, and Parnell says to him, "Happy Valentine's Day, meet your younger brother." Parnell had kidnapped a young boy by the name of Timothy James White. Steven knew that he couldn't let what happened to him happen to this young boy. This dude took action. Parnell would be gone regularly for work, so one day while he was gone, he picked up Timothy and fled in the night. Him and Timothy hitchhiked several miles on a desolate road in the night, till he was picked up by a car who took him to the nearest police station. At this point, Timothy James White was all over the news. So when Steven arrived at the police station, he told police that this was indeed the missing boy. During the police investigation, police asked for his name, and he said that all he knew was that his name was Steven. He proceeds to tell them that he was also kidnapped by Parnell several years ago. The story made national news and the media was all over it. Steven and Timothy were safe. Parnell would soon be arrested and Steven returned to his family. But the story is far from over. So this guy only served 5 years before being granted parole. This was due to the statute of limitations. At this point, Steven moved on and even met a lady with whom he would soon start a family. Just as Steven's family was beginning to think that they could move on, things take an insane twist. It involves the made-for-TV movie, titled after his famous words, "I know my first name is Steven." It also involves this man, seen standing behind Steven during his media interviews. Part 2 to come.
This cult inspired the horror movie Orphan, and it is just incredibly messed up. This movie that traumatized me greatly as a child. So, trigger warning, buckle in, this is going to be a wild, wild ride, guys. Klara Mirova was born in Czechoslovakia in 1975, and she always struggled with mental health issues, depression, grandiosity, feeling like God was calling her on some great and grand mission. Her younger sister Katerina also shared in these delusions, and they were obsessed with it. It took over their entire lives. And even though Klara went away to university, she still couldn't escape this idea that God was beckoning her on a quest. Klara ended up being able to live somewhat of a normal life for a short period of time. She was married and had 2 kids, but soon enough, her weird delusions began coming forward and her marriage ended and she was left with her 2 boys. And don't get me wrong, she loved her kids. She spent enough time with them, she nurtured them, but her loneliness was almost too much to take. So she sought after her sister, and her sister moved in with her and her sons. You might be thinking, Kelsey, this doesn't sound that bad. But shit hit the fan. Well, along came this bundle of joy. Barbara, who was a 33-year-old woman that suffered from a rare disease. This disease caused her to take the appearance of a 12-year-old. And boy, did she take advantage of that. She posed as a schoolboy to get out of legal issues and trouble that she found herself in, and just take advantage in general. She befriended Katerina and Klara and basically started validating the delusion going on in their heads. The sisters agreed to join the Grail cult, which is based heavily off of the Holy Grail, and it says that its members are not weighed down by morals or taboos such as incest, cannibalism, and murder. All of that's okay in the Grail cult. The members around the world were led by a mysterious figure called the Doctor, who also supported slavery along with all those other things. So, horrible! Klara ended up shaving off all of her hair, her eyebrows, she dressed in rags and stopped showering, and it was supported by Barbara and her sister Katerina. This is where things get really bad. Barbara convinced Clara that her children weren't normal and they needed to be punished severely. So Clara ordered a cage from a local blacksmith and placed her children inside of the cage. The boys would remain inside that cage for over a year. And this is where the trigger warning comes in. They were brutally tortured, as in they were whipped, they were starved, they were drowned, they were sleeping in their own feces. And I'm sorry to do it, part 2 up right away. She murdered her entire family so that she could be with her 300-year-old werewolf boyfriend. And no, this is not the plot of Twilight, so buckle in, trigger warning. This is a wild, wild ride. Jasmine Richardson was 12 years old and could best be described as a happy, giggly, just normal child growing up. She had a younger brother and they lived in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada with their parents. That is until she met 24-year-old Jeremy, who would soon be her boyfriend and claimed to be a gothic 300-year-old werewolf. They met at a punk show. Jeremy wore a blood vial around his neck. He loved the taste of blood and convinced Jasmine to join vampirefreaks.com. Jasmine started to change and her aesthetic got darker and darker, and her family definitely noticed it, and when they found out about Jeremy, rightfully so, they grounded her and forbade her from seeing him. I would just like to point out that this is a very clear case of grooming and manipulation, and even though Jasmine still has some responsibility, or a lot of responsibility in what is about to happen in this story, I just want to put that clearly out there because Jeremy was 24 years old and she was 12. Mark and Deborah Richardson did not realize that forbidding their daughter from seeing this menace of a human being, this horrendous person, was going to eventually be the death of them. Jasmine was actually the first one to hatch the plan when it came to killing her entire family, and she messaged Jeremy about it on vampirefreaks.com, saying that she had a plan and it involved killing her family and living with him, basically running away into his arms. Jeremy took a little bit of pleasure in this, it seems, and his response was that they needed to be more creative with her plan. And so over the next few days, they created a murder plan to kill her entire family, younger brother included. On April 22nd, 2006, Jasmine let Jeremy into her house, where he hid in the basement. Deborah heard a loud noise and went to go check it out. Jeremy stabbed her 12 times. Mark came rushing down to the basement after hearing his wife's screams and charged at Jeremy with a screwdriver, but he was no match. He was stabbed 24 times, and when he asked why, Jeremy responded with, "This is what your daughter wanted." And at that point, Mark stopped fighting and took his last breath. Upon seeing her dead family when Jeremy beckoned her forward, Jasmine hugged him and whispered something rather seductive into his ear. And this is when they went upstairs to kill her brother. Part 2 up right away.
This woman literally chopped her baby's arms off with a kitchen knife, all because God told her to. Dina and John Schlosser lived in Plano, Texas with their 3 daughters, ages 9, 6, and 10 months old. On November 22nd, 2004, John got a call from Dina saying she'd just cut off their baby's arms. He thought she was joking, even though Dina had a history of mental illness. Regardless, when you hear a claim like that, it should be taken seriously. Instead of calling the police, John called the pastor of his church. The pastor told John to call someone who can check on Dina and their baby Margaret to make sure everything is okay. He then called his neighbor Carolyn, who worked at a daycare center in the area, and asked for them to check on Dina and Margaret. Carolyn called Margaret on the phone, and that's when things started to get real. It's unclear what the phone call entailed, but whatever it was, it led a fellow daycare employee to call the police. 911 dispatcher Steve Edwards then called